Jesus said, I am. There's a lot more too. We're going to get to that. We are St. Paul Lutheran Church. sp815.org is our website. UAC is our confession. That's the unaltered Augsburg Confession, circa 1530. LCMS, Lutheran Church, the Missouri Synod, or it's from Missouri, or Missouri, Ohio, and other states, or the Germans, or right now, the ones that are pro grace, pro Bible, pro marriage, pro family, and pro life. And here at St. Paul, we think that works real well when you become Psalms praying, Proverbs quoting, red letter following Protestant Christians. And that's what we are. We're a Protestant Christian congregation of believers in Jesus Christ. He is risen. Hallelujah. And you are set apart for discipleship and giving as the kingdom of God. Jesus says two things in our rather lengthy text from chapter 14, 53 through 72, the end of the chapter. He says, I am, and you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power and coming with the clouds of heaven. And then he says in verse 72, it seems to be just from a different story altogether, before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. He's not even there when he says it, it's in Peter's memory. He said it earlier. Um, in those two pieces, we have a tremendous amount of insight, not only into what is called theology, the knowledge of God, for example, the two natures of Jesus Christ, that he is both divine and man. But what does that mean? What you're going to see is Jesus being a real man in this story. And you're going to see Peter also being a real man in this story. And that's going to have everything to do with what Jesus' words mean in their context. So, as I encourage you to be red letter readers of the Bible, it doesn't mean that you can pull 2 words from Jesus out, say them anywhere, and you win. You're right. Haha. It's not how his wisdom works. What it is that his words that sitting there in red, in their context, what's he talking about? Who's talking to him are profound. So that you could start there rather than at the beginning of the story and go into the end. You can start with the red letters and then circle around them and see how it is. It's all about Jesus. The whole thing. Everyone's frustrated with him in our text. Even Peter, a little bit, right? Like he doesn't know what's going on now, but he was ready to fight. Huh? He was not ready to pray. It's so interesting. One of you will betray me. Is it I? Is it I? Here, come pray with me, lest you fall into temptation. Okay. I will never betray you. Oh, here the hour is here. I got the sword. Here we go. Nope, not supposed to use a sword. I mean, Peter just got to be lost at this point. Just completely confused. Poor guy. Maybe he's just like us most days. Right? Like you get home in the evening, you're like, I almost got it done. Sort of. You know. Where is God? What did he mean? Oh my goodness. Now they're asking me questions. I don't know what to say. And then the rooster crows. So I'm dancing a bit around it here. I do want to go from the back, I think. When that rooster crows, and Peter remembers what Jesus said, or look at verse 72. And when he thought about it, he wept. To my read, I mean, if you're able to prove me wrong, I want to know. But to my read, that's the last mention of Peter in this gospel. You have an argument about chapter 16, verses 9 and following. Are they authentic? Are they from actually the 1st century? Or are they from the 3rd century? It's a fair argument. You pick your side. Both are Christian. It's okay. He still doesn't really show up. No. This is the book that's associated historically with him. Mark was not an apostle. How did a gospel written by not an apostle become in the apostolic canon along Matthew and John? Well, how did Luke get there? That one's pretty easy. Paul. Oh, how did Mark get there? Not as easy, but historically clear. Peter. This is the Gospel of Peter. There is this thing called the Gospel of Peter that exists out there you can find. It's written around 250 or something, and it's filled with nonsense from the Gnostic Greek mystery cults. People like to bring it up to avoid talking about what Jesus actually said. But here is the actual gospel that Peter the apostle left, and his stamp on it is precisely when he thought about it, he wept. And I'm done. It's not about Peter. Never was about Peter. Anyone who thinks it's about Peter's worshiping Mary these days, if you think it through. Scary stuff, really. But here, for our sakes, what we see is Peter being a real man in the fullness of all of it. He's a coward. He's full of, they used to say, piss and vinegar. You know? And it's not all bad. It's a lot of boy. There's a lot of boy there that we don't want to destroy because Peter's great. Everyone loves Peter. Jesus loves Peter. And yet here is what Jesus is saving Peter from. And therein is a doorway for you to just fall into that space and be that coward. Be a coward with Peter. Hear the rooster crow. Know that you were asleep, not praying with Jesus. Know that you're powerless, really, in this whole thing. And all the power that you experience now in your faith is what he gave to you, not something you drummed up for yourself. So there's more coming. And that's the promise. You don't have to do anything to get it. You're already in the church. You're baptized, you're washed, you're cleaned. He's speaking the word. The Spirit will continue to do what the Spirit does. You will continue to do what you do, which is to say, I will do this, and you will find out that you didn't quite at least half the time. And then you will say to yourself in your head, how dare you? Shame on you. Maybe you're not even a, and remember, the rooster is good news. What Jesus says always comes true. He knew beforehand. Every time Peter boasted, Jesus just kind of had to have secondhand embarrassment. Yeah. He knew it was coming. And he went through the cross anyway, not only for Peter, but for you, me, for us all, for the whole world. John says, I don't want to get out of the gospel too much, but so let's go through this story that ends with what I just said, right? Starting at verse 66, and then we'll go back and we'll deal with the I am, which is just so beautiful. But so Peter is below in the courtyard following, if we look, Mark does this with his stories a lot. He creates sandwiches. So verse 53, they in 54, Peter's mentioned following at a distance into the court of the high priest, and he's with the servants warming by the fire. And then we go away to Jesus, and then we come back to Peter. So these little sandwiches of story, Mark does it all the way through his structure. I haven't really talked about that much this year, but it's really evident here. So in any case, we're getting the back piece of bread on the story, and it's kind of the payoff. Right. So where Jesus is going to be showing himself to be the unequivocal man, the only man, the uber man, the great, great, there is only one like him man. Peter's outside fighting and just getting further and further from God. Now, so it says Peter was below in the courtyard. One of the servant girls of the high priest comes. So now who's he going to be afraid of? I mean, have you ever been afraid of a 13-year-old girl? An 8-year-old girl? I mean, should you be? How often does that happen? Why? And what's she going to do? And so, like, this is something. I mean, he's really afraid. When she saw Peter warming himself, she looked at him and she said, "Oh, you also were with Jesus of Nazareth, right?" Like, this is not a death sentence. This means nothing. She's like, "Oh, aren't you one of them?" Like she's just curious, and maybe she'll be like, "Hey, he's one of them," but like, John's there too. It doesn't say this, but John's here. John's in the courtyard and actually has gone inside a little bit more. So Peter's not even alone. And yet her simple question spurs his fear. See how fear will get a hold of him and he will go from small no to great no too. He will have to defend his lie rather than just admit, you know what? Yeah, I was with the guy. I like the guy. I know the guy. He denied it, saying, I neither know nor understand what you are saying. So he does try to pull rank. You know, little girl, you're out of your station. I don't understand you. Who let this 13-year-old girl talk to me? Like that's really what he's doing. And he has every right to do that in the society that they're in, well, anywhere really. Why should a 13-year-old girl interrupt a stranger who's a man at a fire in a giant public court? I mean, it's not normally what happens, right? So he's kind of playing sly. He kind of doesn't have to be totally afraid yet, but his knees are shaking. And he went out on the porch, and the rooster crows the first time. Did he hear it? Doesn't say. I don't know. What do you hear? Right? What does your heart do? Do you say, oh no? It's like the axe going off or the chainsaw going off in the basement and they're opening the doors. Like, are you going to do something about it? What are you going to do? She sees him again, 69, and began to say to those who stood by, this is one of them. So now she's pulling rank. Now she's saying, well, if you're going to be like that, I'm going to out you. It's quite a thing. He denied it again. A little later, those who stood by to Peter said, surely you are one of them, for you are a Galilean, and your speech shows it. The tongues, the curse of Babel. He speaks with a lisp or something like that. And as a result, he begins to curse and swear. I do not know this man of whom you speak. And the rooster crows. He remembers, he weeps. That's the guy who will die in Rome, killed by Caesar, like Paul, uh, for the sake of this fact that Jesus is risen from the dead. That makes him Lord, King, God. No. It's not as though this is here for us to say we should expect to always be cowards as Christians. Not at all. I think what we're to expect to be is in the train of the great I am, who's about to speak in a moment. But when we find in us the flesh, your sinful condition, the weakness of your spirit at war, don't be surprised. And don't let you accuse you of not loving Jesus just because you fell asleep, just because you stumbled, as if he weren't there all along, not only picking you up so you go again, but using every stumble to move all of us into a better truth, which is under him. Sometimes you stumble because you're just running in the wrong direction. You're supposed to turn around. Yeah. So with our time at, we got plenty of time. Good. I thought we were further than we are. Let's go back and lead into verse 62 now with the story. But this I am moment, uh, I am is famous in the Gospels or John's use of it, where there are 7 times that Jesus will say, I am. And maybe even more if you kind of read more carefully in the Greek, but there's 7 big ones. I am the way and the truth and the life, or I am the vine, you are the branches. I am the gate, right? I am the good shepherd. I am the resurrection and the life. So each of those statements is surrounding another big moment where he will say, I believe in Matthew, before Abraham was, I am. So now you have multiple gospels with Jesus making this statement, I am, has a ring to it that, if you know your Old Testament, has to go back to when Moses is trying to kind of finagle God into teaching him who he's supposed to speak for. And God says, I am that I am. Right? But that's his name. And you can even kind of see in the tetranomogram, a fancy word for the name of God with 4 letters in the early Old Testament. God's either called God or the Lord. The Lord is not a true translation, it's a translation of his name. That name is 4 letters we don't know how to pronounce. You've heard it as Jehovah, you may have heard it as Yahweh, right? All of that, now I have to remember why I brought up all of that. Uh, uh, mm, Dear Jesus, these are the moments I fear, that right there, where I took you far enough in explaining why that I don't have what anymore, right? But the point of this, ultimately, anytime I'm going to talk about the name of God, Yahweh, is to see that this is Jesus in the Old Testament. It is the identity of him as not Baal, right? As not Odin, right? As not the other gods, he is the one true and only God. And oh, yes. So then when Jesus says, I am, that's the point, that's the payoff. When it's not just Yahweh in the desert saying, I am to Moses, but they're saying, are you that guy? And he's like, I am. Well, now this man is making quite a claim and they kill him for it. So the setup there, more on it as we get to it. Uh, Verse 53 says, they led Jesus away to the high priest, and with him were assembled all the chief priests, the elders, and the scribes. And the other gospels go into much more details about who this is. But here, Mark is concerned with this storyline, with the cloud of emotion he's going to build as a picture. So you don't have to know who Annas and Caiaphas are. That's not really important right now. What he wants you to see is that there's a big crowd of people and there's at least three different types of authority figures there. Right. So imagine going somewhere where not only are the local royalty, think at least princes and barons, if not actually someone from the crown, but then like all the people from your life who are older than you, who you know ever, like your college professors and like anybody who's ever had authority over you, they're there now, and a bunch of lawyers, tons of lawyers, like a whole, like all of them, all the lawyers in the city. Like this is put yourself there as a man for a moment, or a woman, or a child, however you must, but indeed bodily stand there and feel it. Like, are you ready to give strong answers, confident answers? Are you ready to not answer their lies? It's quite a thing what he's going to do just walking through this. Peter follows again at a distance in the courtyard, and he sat with the servants. Okay, verse 55. The chief priests and all the council sought testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but found none. So they're trying to rig up some charges. Yeah. But how long do you sit through? I mean, how would you do with 2 hours of lies that you're not even really able to answer? You just have to listen to it. And the whole group is trying to put it together. Uh, And you know you're going to die. You already know the father told you. You sweated blood this night, right? You know. But now you got to listen to this. And I mean, when you hear a lie, how do you feel? Just a lie about anything. Someone says, this is true. And you're like, that's not true, you know? And then what if it's about you? This person's like that. Well, wait a minute. I'm not like that. He, hours of lies about him being God. And actually, some of it's probably true. And they're just scoffing at it instead. What a strange experience this definitely had to be. They can't bring testimony together. They have to have two witnesses who agree, which is I've learned this just in private life, like with kids, you know. One says this, one says that. I need two witnesses to agree before I know what really happened, right? It's really kind of the way it works. And not all witnesses come with the same capacity for telling the truth. That said, again, they bring a bunch against him. Their testimonies don't agree. They almost get something. Verse 57. They summarize up and they bear false witness. And what they say is this: they say, we heard him say, I will destroy this temple made with hands. And within 3 days, I will build another made without hands. But not even then did their testimony agree. So, they can't seem to get their story right. I've pondered this verse a lot. Like, how could they not even get that much to be the same? Like, if you're rigging the charges, you know, you're setting it up behind the scenes where you have a card where you're memorizing what you're going to say, so you can make sure, or you're gathering these guys. You guys have a story, right? Your story is this, your story is that. Like, how do they get to the very middle of it and not be able to make it work? Jesus. I mean, what I got is Jesus. I don't know. They stumbled. They looked in his eyes. What they couldn't get it out. What they do say isn't even true. He never said he would destroy the temple. He told them to destroy the temple. If you do it, I'll raise it up in 3 days. And he was talking about his body, not the other building. So, like, they're actually going to do it. Now, it's all going to come true, but it doesn't work. So the high priest is getting frustrated. John tells us that they missed the Passover meal. This went longer than they wanted it to as well. The high priest stood up in the midst and asked Jesus, saying, do you answer nothing? Well, I skipped that verse there. Verse 59. Uh, oh, no, that's not right. It's verse 61 I'm looking for. So, yeah, do you answer nothing? What is it these men testify against you? But he kept silent and answered nothing, right? So you see a pack dynamic event here going on. So remember, this is a huge crowd. There's a lot of energy. There's a lot of fear and pressure being put on this guy, and they're bringing up lies about him. They're trying to get him to crack or break in a certain way, and so they're hotboxing him, right? They're bringing accusations against him. Well, what about this? Well, what about that? Well, what about this? And he never answers. And again, I challenge you to remember the last time somebody accused you of anything, and I can guarantee you answered before you thought. He knows the wisdom of letting the accuser just talk. Just go. You keep accusing all you want. I don't feed it. I don't validate it. How do I validate it? Defend myself. I don't need to be defended. And you have this power in Jesus Christ. You are justified by grace alone, baptized into the kingdom of God. You never need to defend yourself again against anybody's accusation. Not before you turn and pray to Jesus about it. Someone cousin says anything to you, give me a second. Dear Jesus, they just said this about me. I didn't know I did that. Did I do that? I mean, like, take a moment with God before you let someone else tell you who you are. Jesus doesn't need to take a moment. He is, but that's the model that you are born again into, baptized to be one with a member of the communion in his body. That kind of bravado, can I call it that? It's not bravado. It's manhood. And it's beautiful and it's for women and children as well, but not without being manhood first. Uh, So he won't answer. He's above it. He rises above it. He's bigger than it. Uh, So then the high priest asks him a question that's not an accusation. It's not a falsehood. It's not twisted. Are you the Christ that's going to be Messiah, right? Uh, the anointed one, Saul, king of Israel, is the first Christ of Israel. David is the second. Cyrus of Persia is a Christ of God, according to Isaiah. It means chosen and anointed to be the savior of something. But by this point in history, everyone knows the son of David has got to, sit on the throne of David again, which doesn't exist. And if you're reading the Essenes, you know he's got to be the suffering servant who dies first. Even the Middle Testament times, there are people who understood that. Uh, and Jesus himself, John the Baptist himself, are you the Christ? What did it mean? For the high priest, though, they are not expecting this guy. They're not expecting a rabbi who does miracles. They're expecting a prince from the house of David to rise up, to be born, or maybe from a different lineage. I don't know. I've wondered at times today for those who are Jews who are waiting for the Messiah to come, what tribe they believe he will come from. Are they waiting? Do they keep track of records with regard to who's got lineage that is worthy? I don't know why they wouldn't. It would make perfect sense to do so if it was my religion. It's not my religion, so I don't know. I've wondered about it though, because this idea of Messiah is what Judaism is supposed to be about, according to the Old Testament at least. And Christianity is the belief that this Messiah is, in fact, Jesus and has come. And that Judaism, as a modern phenomena, is the rejection of the Messiah in the hopes of some other idea. And it starts right here where they say, are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed? And they're not going to take it when he says yes. Anyone who follows this high priest from that point on is part of not Judaism, really, not Israelitism, really. Certainly not Christianity, right? They've rejected the Christ. What are they part of? I don't know. What is the synagogue about? That's a good question. But again, the question here is, are you the one we have been waiting for? Are you the only one that can be, And does that mean you are the Son of God? Oh, that he could ask this question without any faith is kind of amazing. It really is. I mean, he sets it all right up. And Jesus, who hasn't said a word for hours, I am. The guy's going to rip his clothes. Jesus doesn't stop. He says more. But I mean, guy's going to rip his clothes. We got you. He thinks he won. High priest thinks he won. Trapped him in his words. Yeah. I am. The power of God being not you is so beautiful that God is I am that's not you, that he is him and you are you, but you are his and he is yours. That's what it means to have the great I am tell you who you are so you may say, I am his. Now I am is in you. As you say, I am yours. The Spirit lives. We are made in his image. It is beautiful, this name, I am. And when Jesus says it here in the middle of this pack, this herd turned against him with all of their malice and bloodlust, he is willing to be who he is. Because his God, the Father, as Mark talks about it at one point, right? Our God, the Father, who is the one who sent him to us, is so true in his heart as his son. His faith in him as a man is so true that he can walk into this place and walk right through it, taking what comes. And while we might say, well, that's Jesus, Peter did walk on water, and the martyrs will die deaths more gruesome or as gruesome as Christ's. I'm not suggesting that that's where you want to go tomorrow. Let's all get martyred tomorrow and see how strong we can be. No, no. I'm saying that when somebody looks at you with a funny face and scowls and says a bunch of fancy words about how you're hateful, that you just don't move anymore. Because you can say, I am Christ's. So whatever they accused you of, I am Christ's first. And again, this is who you've been promised to be. This is not an option today. It's only a matter of how long you wait until you figure this out, that this is who God's making you forever. Not him, but I am, nonetheless, your own version of that. Now, the I am that is him, he says, you will see the Son of Man. He pulls in that intertestamental phrase, which is about the Christ and the Son of David and the Messiah and the one who Elijah is going to come before and all these other things. It's also connected to Daniel and the visionary understanding of the kingdoms of the earth and how they will come and go and how they don't matter. So far as the ship of the church and the faithful is sailing through those times, it's all kind of there. I mean, we could do forever on the Son of Man. It's an open book right there. But he says this, he pulls all that power into I am and that. I'm going to sit at the right hand of the power. Right, the one you call God, he says to them sometimes. You call him God. He's not your God. You don't even know who he is, right? But the power, the Almighty, the eternal. And here's where, if you're a Greek, you get all trapped up in trying to understand Father, Son, and Spirit and whether or not and how it works. And you try to draw a diagram and make it make sense, but you don't have to do that. You can be a Hebrew and just believe that Jesus is how the Father wants you to see God and that the Father is God and that Jesus is God. And it's just that simple. It's over. Move on. Your king is God. He worships a God who is his father, who is your father. It doesn't have to be hard. It can just be the way things are. The Greeks, the godless among us, the skeptics and the atheists and the scoffers, they like to make us worry about things that don't matter. You see, but what about this? But what about this? But that doesn't make sense. What do you mean it doesn't make sense? You think we're monkeys? You think we came from a big bang? And you're mad that that I'm just going to trust that God's incomprehensible? It's so much simpler to trust the wisdom of the scriptures than to try to be smart in the present. Again, he sits at the right hand of the power. That means the way Jesus is reigning right now is not by doing the way you would expect. He's sitting down. He's not standing up. He's going to stand up. That's the last day, right? He's going to stand up. Now he's got you standing up while he sits. And how does that work? How is he in every single one of our hearts and eyes and hands at all times across the world? This is the most unbelievable first person video game multiplayer thing you can imagine. He's with us all at once. Everything boys try to do with video games, Jesus more than has done with his kingdom. And truly, he invites you into the real version of it, which is not on a screen, but with the actual people you're sitting beside. Behind it all, though, he's making each of us move so that when something bad happens to you, it puts you on a train with righteousness that turns that bad into good every time. All of your mistakes are, in fact, leading toward a perfection, which isn't just in the future. It's just saying, oh, okay, Jesus doesn't need me to be perfect now. That's a different kind of perfection. That's the perfection of faith alone. I'm not looking for the ideal. I'm not trying to make Eden grow in my backyard. I'm walking through a desert that, frankly, is pretty green at the moment. But I'm walking through a desert with a fire god who would burn it all for the evil that I'm very well aware of, and yet isn't going to because he's just that good. And so he's bought us back from it with promises that cannot be denied. Election, I'm going to say it as often as I can remember. Election is a doctrine of the Bible. It means you don't get a choice. And it's such good news because you're already here. Again, the Greek says, well, what about the people who don't get a choice and didn't get a choice? And again, you're talking about imaginary things. Where are they? Show me them. Let's go talk to them right now. Let's find this person you're so worried about and say something rather than say, what about this person who I imagined that doesn't exist to make God's word not true toward me in terms of how good he is toward me, in terms of how confident I should always be because I am. Like you sabotage yourself. And you, who do you think does this most? No, I know the walk because I hate myself quite a bit. But I love being able to say I am his. I'll be able to say to God, you are mine. I love knowing that my heart is in his hands and I'm going to see him in this power without fear, the way these guys are going to. Coming with the clouds of heaven. I mean, that is how he left. That's how he ascends, right? That's how he shall return. And please do believe that the reason that people put incense around altars like this when they commune in ancient times was to show you how the cloud of heaven is already coming again in the meal. You don't see it, you believe it. Believing it's more powerful than seeing it. And as you believe, so you will see the God of love, fathers, kings, orphans, widows, fishermen. You will see him in your life, your God, the God of what you do. For all good crafts, all good deeds, he makes them. And he wants you to thrive in them, not be destroyed. He loves on his scales. So this very meal is his cloud coming again. And yet the words you will see with the clouds of heaven, he's invoking judgment day. He really is saying, okay, this conversation's for judgment day now. So are you the son of Christ or son of God? Yes. And on judgment day, you'll know. So he shuts his mouth and they kill him. But it's not over for the high priest yet. This guy lived out his life somewhere near the Sea of Galilee. They kind of did collect around a synagogue near the Sea of Galilee after the destruction of the temple. And these guys, they died in their sin. They died in their unbelief. They will rise at the resurrection of the just and unjust and be seen as the goats that they are. And Jesus, in this moment, is looking him in the eye and knowing that. And again, I suggest to you that is a power as a Christian you are free to invoke against your enemies when they reveal that they hate God, Christ, and you to you. Doesn't mean you have to say anything. What does he do? He mostly doesn't say anything. But you may understand that judgment day is coming and judgment day is good enough. And so if they took from you and there's nothing you can do about it, and it's even being made law, right? And that's the case for a lot of people these days. If you're having it, if injustice is coming upon you, if it's not fair, if that was wrong, but there's nothing you can do, the day is coming. And it's not wrong for you to think on that day, justice will be served. Everything that was done against me for my good, I tried to love and they hated. Well, they're going to get it. And that feeling, well, they're going to get it, is release for you when you can own it. If you try to hold on to this, everyone needs to go to heaven anyway thing, you're denying what God has said. Everyone's not going to heaven. He doesn't desire the death of the wicked, but they're going to die and he's going to do it for good reason. And so we can like be okay with that and in fact joyous in that. And I suggest that is what gives you the power to when someone accuses you, keep your mouth shut. Love them anyway. Even though they're like judgment day is coming and man, you're going to get it. So here's a cup of water now. Because I can't, nothing I say is going to change their mind about me. They hate me. They hate Jesus. Nothing I can do. So why do I cast my pearls before the swine? I shall not. But can I love them? Yes. And I will love them knowing that burning coals are coming upon their heads soon enough. And it's not wrong in me to be aware that that's freedom from their evil. It's freedom from their evil that they want to stay in. What is a woman? What is a woman? They want to stay in that. They want to stay in that. All right. He invokes judgment day on the high priest and then goes to face his own portion, knowing that since he's going to be given the least possible of what he deserves, it will earn all righteousness for all kind, right? As by sin entered as sin entered the world by one man, so now by this one man, so much more righteous than the rest of us. Righteousness is purchased for all men. That's Paul. High priest tears his clothes. He calls it blasphemy. Eh, It's not blasphemy to tell the truth. It's not blasphemy to read what is obviously there for you to see. It is blasphemy to try to manipulate God, to reject God, and as Jesus points out, to call the Spirit of God evil. That's the biggest blasphemy. That's what is happening here. They condemn him to death. Some begin to spit on him, blindfold, beat him, prophesy. We're coming toward all of this as we go. To close up for the morning, we are in a staggered view of Jesus' passion, story through Lent. Okay, so last week Jesus foretold he would die. This week we saw him before the Sanhedrin. Next week he's going to foretell he's going to die again. So we're kind of going back a little ways. But then the week after that, he's going to be before Pilate. So we're walking back and forth between Jesus telling his disciples what's happening and him going through it so that we're going to hit Passion Week right at the moment of it all. So I pray again that I am, who is your God, gives you the power this week to know that you are his, and therefore your I am. When you say I am me before anything, it means you are good because that's who he's called you to be. In the name